I'm Mark Robertson back with you here talking about my book, Carrying Lawn Chairs, Youth Sports and Other Parental Mindsets. We're going over each chapter and talking about it, giving a brief synopsis of each chapter. So, heck, you can watch all these videos and don't even have to buy the book, but it is available in the usual places on Amazon, an electronic book and a regular book. And it talks divided into two sections. The first part, I talk about parents and youth sports and all the problems I have with organized youth sports, and that I don't really think there's answers to solve the problems in youth sports. I just am against it overall until the child gets older, at 10, 12 years old. I think it's crazy to put kids in organized youth sports at a very young age. It's harmful to kids at the very least. It's they don't like it. They do it to get the love of their parents. They think the parents must be right, but they don't enjoy being involved in organized youth sports. And the second part of the book, I talk about various other dynamics with the parent and the child and have various chapters on a number of topics. Today, the chapter is called Born Good. It is my belief that no child comes out of the womb a bad child, a bad person, evil. No one is born evil. I'm not an expert, I'm not a professional, but I think the way that people turn to bad or evil, they are programmed that way by various things that happen to them, various words they hear growing up, and every child absorbs everything. Everything goes into their system, and they become who they are programmed to be. If a child is not loved and nurtured and cared for and told that they are wonderful, they will turn out a lot of times to be have a negative adulthood. And every child wants to hear that they are loved by their parents or their guardians, whoever, and the children turn into the person that they were programmed to be. If a child is beaten and put down verbally, they will turn out most likely to be a very dysfunctional adult and have major problems. And people ask, you say no one is born evil. What about like people like Hitler and Stalin? Were they born evil? They had to be born evil. Well, I don't believe they were. I believe they came out of the womb innocent children, just like all other children, and that they turned into evil monsters by their programming. From what I have heard, read, both Hitler and Stalin had very abusive fathers, probably alcoholic fathers who beat them regularly. So they get a very distorted view of the world in which they live, and a very distorted view of themselves and their motivations and what motivates them. And it leads them, and it's a long path to the point where they killed millions of people. But I really do believe that the programming that they received, very negative programming, was the major factor in having them turn out to be the monsters they were. Now, does this mean that every child who is beaten by their father turns into be a mass murdering dictator? Obviously not. But they will have problems too. They will have dysfunctional problems in adult. And no, I don't have all the answers to why Hitler and Stalin turned out the way they did. But I do not believe that they were born evil. They were programmed in some bizarre, insane way that caused them, and various other experiences in their life brought them to the road where they became evil dictators and brutal killers, and gave them a totally distorted view of life. It's the system that they were I'm sure brainwashing was somehow part of it as well. And their background caused them to act out this evil. And so the answers, like I say, I don't have all the answers, but I do know that the background and programming is very important. And what I understand, people like in that era, beating kids was a normal way of raising children. So Hitler could recruit people as well to be part of his cause, and it's kind of a tough situation. It really created a lot of chaos. It's the way kids are raised. It changes society. Obviously, that's an example of it. And you have here in this country, you got every day many murders in the inner cities. Now, are these kids born bad? Obviously not. They're not born bad. But most of them grow up in single-parent households with no father and no guidance, and they turn to gangs to get their familial needs met, and murder and chaos and total distortions of life, and the value of life becomes all out of whack, out of sync, and it turns into chaos. And that's why our inner cities are chaotic at this point. And I really think government policy brought a lot of that about, even with the welfare state. It's not a good situation, and various incentives, and over time, it turns it into a very chaotic, very dangerous, very troubling situation. And like I say, none of these kids are born bad, but they turn into killers from their background, their upbringing. They don't know any different. They don't value life, and just have a hopeless view of life. And it comes from their programming, and programming from various government policies that turns this situation to be very chaotic. So in other words, there is something in the background that turns these young, innocent kids who are born very innocent and precious into killers. It's whether it's on a world scale dictatorship or murderers in the neighborhood. These are my opinions. I don't believe anybody is born bad. And you have this negative programming. The kids that we all grow up in families. There's always problems in families, and no family's perfect. And so we all have overcoming. Parents all make mistakes. But how do we overcome it? Well, basically know that your programming is how you became who you are. And that's a good starting point to know that you have belief systems were programmed into you, and even in your subconscious mind is programmed, and to be you who you are. That's why it's difficult to change, and you may obviously need some professional help. I'm not a professional, but I do know that how we are programmed is who we become. And whether it's good or bad, it's kind of you're born, you can go either way. If you're loved as a child and nurtured, and that doesn't mean you can't have discipline, but I don't even, they ask about spanking. We'll just change the word spanking to hitting. I'm not for hitting kids. I'm not saying parents can't push kids, but make sure you do it properly. Know the child. Push them in the right areas. Push them the right way. Yes, kids can be more than they think they can be, but they have to be it on the right path. They can't go against the child's grain. And so there are a lot of questions, and I don't have answers for a lot of things, most things. I'm throwing a lot of things out there, and hopefully it can benefit people that have maybe give them a different perspective. And like I say, I'm not a parental guru. I'm throwing things out. I want to be part of a team, give you some ideas, and how things could be better in the parent-child dynamic. But once again, kids are born good. They need to be loved, and they need to be programmed in a positive fashion. It's like we're not intentionally programming them, but the word programming is kind of not a very caring type word, but it's how the child perceives the world, and that's who they turn in to be. And it can be a positive or a negative. The child can go either way, and it's obviously much better to take the child or push the child down the positive path, and it will lead to a much happier life. And there are things that can be done. Parents can have so much power over how their child turns out. The excuse that, well, they were just born that way, that doesn't cut it. No child is born bad. Every child is a precious human being that wants to be loved, and that's the best thing you could do for your child, to make sure, or at least to do the best you can to lead them onto a life that is happy and fulfilling, to get them started on the right road with positive programming. Well, thanks again. We'll see you next time. You take care.